We have, it's time for question and answer again. Austin Matz is going to help lead us for this question and answer. So if you have, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn this around. So hopefully everybody out there can see everybody here better. And if you are online, please add your questions in the Q&A or feel free to raise your hand.
Ed has a question.
Yeah, I would ask a question for Arthur. So with the warping of the data transfer, that doesn't impact the relative size of the individual triangles because you move it back to the original shape, right? I was thinking about the proportional makeup of different colors. So when you're warping the specimen, warping mesh, does that modify the relative proportions of those meshes? Or?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. If you deform like things to the mean shape, then the size of the triangles relative to the initial won't be the same.
Will that impact the kind of the makeup of the proportions of colors? If the kind of the middle is warping, and that seems to be the main part.
If you had very low resolution, you couldn't get those color patches correctly. Yeah, probably. But if you have enough resolution in the vertex, because essentially we're mapping back to the vertex,
right?
Each vertex. So as long as you have enough resolution, that I don't expect it to be. But if you have a very low resolution model and you're trying to do that, then perhaps you get a larger respect.
Other questions? Are there any online?
I have another question. I've always got more questions about the photography stuff. So transparency, Zach, you mentioned the fin rate thing. That's always going to be a challenge, right? How do folks who work with the photography work handle transparencies or translucencies, translucent material?
I mean, one way that we solve it is reconstructing that portion of the mesh using and running, because the textures and how it's really just the meshing part of the software that just can't really do aspects. But once you create that mesh in that area, you can still then utilize the texture from that exact region. We plotted. So that's my experience with it. Is really you just have to go in and do some post processing in Blender, fix the mesh of that area. Is that?
Yeah.
So there are this would be probably difficult to do with specimens, but there are sprays that you can spray on the material and the stuff can make away, and then you can retexture it out. So you would then be building your model against a kind of covered specimen, and then after a few minutes, when that just appears, you then use those. But I don't know anyone's ever done that, for specimens.
Yeah,
I feel like graphic arts.
And I guess fossils, something. If you got a shiny fossil.
Yeah, you could do it to also cover up shiny.
that wouldn't work too well regularly. Fluxes a lot of events.
Probably not. And the fact that it's a spray and
So I'm not trying this, but just thinking of that specimen. Have you tried imaging them in infrared? They might not be transparent. It's worth a shot.
Yeah, that's a good idea. One of the issues is, transparency, but also how thin they are. And that when something does start to dry, it's usually starting at the ends first. And then that's when you start getting the shape differences and the alignments are just off. And that's where you get, that shape that's in line too. But that's definitely right. That's a good idea.
Good.
So from online, what methods can be used to ensure color capture information is standardized to an accurate color value beyond ensuring all imaging are taken under the exact same lighting conditions?
So it was mentioned before using color checker during your imaging and having that in the beginning. What we like to do is not actually post-process the white balance of the color correction when you transfer all your images in, just because it takes long. It's another step and takes time to do that. But we more so just use the color checker as a calibration on our actual texture file that's later produced. And, you know, there has been a lot of conversation actually recently in a listserv talking about the accuracy of color in general for 3D models, especially in photogrammetry and light scanners, that there are problems even with how the texture is created, that it's not always as accurate as we want it to be. So it's still developing.
I have my own question. So like, when we do like remote sensing field stuff, we typically have like algorithms that, try to at least, correct for how much light is coming into a sensor. Is anything like that being done, like to help standardize, like lighting across stuff? Like images for color and stuff, or is it pretty standard, like how much lighting is being used for, taking pictures of specimens?
I mean, we have like our standard light setup we use to use lighting, you know, flashes, and then I think for the standard, I mean, you could look at whatever your aperture is set at. Yes. If you want to use that information for metadata to kind of understand how much light is coming through. Is that kind of the question?
Well, kind of the question is like, how do you standardize across collections if you're pulling data from multiple photogrammetry collections that you want to use for training data? Like, how do you standardize across multiple collections?
You want to go through?
I was just kind of gonna build off that question as I've mentioned everybody talk about color and approximating color, but I haven't mentioned anyone talk about color spaces. So in photography, there are specific color spaces that most photographers and museum collections use, like ProPhoto. A big one is Adobe RGB, and these big color gamuts of spaces, but I haven't heard anyone here mention them. So like you can actually use them in the program, but also in most of the digital programs, you apply this profile, and this profile can then be kind of collaborated or then applied to your workflow, and it how to kind of answer that, you use the same color space to recognize those colors. But then people talk about approximating a 2D color space to a 3D application where you can basically create your own colors based off of the original color space provided. But there's certain gamut ranges that could create false color, but there are certain spaces that, depending on if you apply that and make an overlay, you can actually create an overlay of a color space that exists and then apply it based off of kind of what Zach was talking about with real color or approximations of color using laser shading and photogrammetry, but you guys haven't talked about that.
All right. Well, we should earmark that for later discussion or maybe lunch discussion. We're going to move on now to the next talk, and
Should
Jill.
we need to go?